Do you think that waiting until you are married for is a good idea? Why or why not? I know a couple who are waiting until marriage. They both agree on it and are fine with it, but they have ridiculously over-the-top tickle fights. It makes me so uncomfortable to witness. I'd almost rather see them bang in front of me. It's band camp levels of tension that just won't ever go away. My partner and I have these really physical fights where his kids yell, "Come quick." They are torturing each other again. We both agreed the other day that it's basically a representation of something else we're feeling. Horny. We can't have when the kids are awake, so it's the next best thing. I think the kids have come to the conclusion that Daddy and Princess have. They are grossed out when we kiss, and he's been caught being handsy a few times. The consensus is that they are understanding more of Daddy's Yule overtures now that they've had Ed at school. It's nice to know that he would pound me into the mattress given half the chance. If you want to try and wait till marriage, then great, go for it. But do it for yourself and don't set it up as some unbreakable vow. If you meet someone that you think is the one and you want to have before marriage, then go for it. Don't feel like you have to be married before having. The good concept about waiting till marriage to have is that you don't want to just go having with anyone. The point is for you to think that the person that you marry is special enough for you to want to marry them. But the same thing can apply to having. You want to think that the person you have with is special enough. The special event can still just be. It doesn't have to be marriage. You don't want to end up marrying someone just because you felt like having with them. No, we waited and we were not compatible eventually. He cheated and we got divorced. Also, being compatible usually is not a reason to get married either. Was going to add the compatibility thing. It's really important that you and your partner are both on the same wavelengths when it comes to. You don't have to be 100% compatible, but you need to have significant overlaps in interests and needs, or it'll be one of the first breaking points of any relationship, and it's a big one. You really don't want to wait until you have to get lawyers involved to encounter a big sign that says this isn't going to work out, when it's entirely possible to have encountered it months or years prior. I don't put an ounce of stock in the Yule compatibility topic as a valid argument for before marriage. I've known far too many people whose drive, preference changed at different stages in their life. I've also known people that have had vastly different drives during the limerence phase, and people that outright bait and switched after marriage. You can be extremely compatible before marriage or even right after it, but that doesn't mean in 2 years, despite having premarital. You will be compatible, and I don't care what anyone does in their bedroom. I'm not making an argument against premarital. I make an argument that premarital isn't a good indicator of long-term or even short-term Yule compatibility. Paraphrasing Lewis Black, if you wait until marriage to have, then you are a gambler on a level I can't even imagine. All I would say to these people is the most chemistry I've ever had with a woman was the least chemistry in bed I've ever had with a woman. We basically finished each other's sentences, and even the kissing was outstanding. But she had a really shallow vagina, and I have a longer. Her pelvic bone hit me in a real weird spot that felt like it was going to snap my dick right off. I think about this whenever I hear of some Mormon or Christian who's saving themselves. The reverse might even be worse. A woman saving themselves for someone who has a micro. In times and places, people did this. They were teenagers when they got married. Keep that in mind. I so wish that people that are in my ultra-strict Christian community would address this. About a year ago, right around my 30th birthday, I started questioning some of the very strict religion that I was taught, which I can only admit in the safety of anonymity. I had been celibate almost my whole 20s, not even a kiss for 8 long years, all under the guise of waiting on God, but the husband never came, and by 30 I got a bit bitter with my religion lol cause nothing I was taught was working. I've listened to a lot of sermons, read lots of books, attended lots of conferences, and there were lots of questions that people seemed to skate around. This was the main one. The Bible is quoted as the way to do things, but it's easy to stay abstinent when you get married at 13. For women, but it's a whole other beast when you're grown and your body is biologically saying make a baby. At least 50% of the month, and there's no marriage in sight. I've been married for over a year. She was adamant about waiting for marriage, and I was all for it because I love her. And when it comes to, all I've wanted to do is bring her joy in bed. In the year plus since our wedding, she initiates most of the time, but I have never brought her to orgasm. She does not let me touch her between her legs. She doesn't want oral. She thinks lube is icky. She'd never go for toys. Whenever I ask her if she liked it after, the answer is always I don't know, which really means no. I ask her what she likes. She says she doesn't know. She's read up so much on fertility and pregnancy and fitness and gained a strong understanding of her body in those areas, but hasn't done anything like that when it comes to. I asked her what position she enjoys the most. She said she doesn't really enjoy any, but does enjoy the fact that I enjoy it. I told her that's not how it works, and that if she's not enjoying it, it just feels empty for me. I had always thought compatibility was something partners can achieve together, that any issue could be resolved through communication and experimentation, that she'd refuse all my attempts to please her just wasn't something I had thought of. I have a friend who waited until marriage, but they tested the waters before it. They had heavy kissing sections, masturbate each other, and give oral, so they were aware of what kind of things they liked and how their partner acted in intimacy. In theory, this is a great way to wait till marriage, since you leave penetration for the big day but you're not going completely blind. Well, turns out that she's extremely allergic to latex. Her wedding night was a nightmare. Their honeymoon was partially ruined, and they couldn't do PIV properly until 3 months after the wedding while they figure out what was going on. No, not saying you should everyone that propositions you, but you should make sure you are compatible with someone before marrying them. Too many people find out too late they can't stand someone's actual personality. Things change after. People calm down and get real. They stop being on their best behavior. Get to know the real person before you marry an intolerable hole. No, I plan to. If I had, it would have absolutely ruined my life. I used to be very religious. I only kissed one boy in high school, and we dated from just after freshman year until college. Our families liked each other. We went to the same church. He was my best friend, and I assume life partner. We had what felt like infinite discussions on faith, marriage, family, finances, all of what seemed important as a teenager. We had decided with our family's support that we were going to wait until after college for marriage. They discouraged it, but we went ahead and got engaged since we were going to 2 different schools. Since we were engaged, we decided to have. We were each other's only after all. The next 2 years nearly wrecked me. Anytime we were semi-alone, his hands were on me. He would get upset if I made plans that meant we were going out with friends somewhere where wasn't happening. He unhooked my bride a bowling alley. He put his hands up my skirt at restaurants. The last Christmas we were together, his sister pulled me aside to ask why I was carrying a cousin's toddler around all night like a shield. I admitted some of the issues and soon after had a conversation with his sisters, mother and aunt about how they knew it was hard now, but once I had kids of my own, things would settle down. I didn't want kids. I'd been open about that from the beginning. I wanted my degree. He kept pushing me to get a lower degree as a safety net and to go ahead and get married. After 2 years of constantly feeling like my body didn't even belong to me, I considered it. I thought if we were married and able to just have regular, then at least he'd be satisfied and wouldn't paw at me all the time when we were out. Thankfully, my own sister realized I was miserable and convinced me that what was happening was not love or what I owed anyone. If we had waited, I would have given up my job, my future, and my happiness for a person I wasn't compatible with and who was willing to throw away my contentment to get his dick wet. One of the only pieces of advice my mom ever gave me, I was 13. Never get married before having. They might be really bad, and you'll have to stay with them forever. Thanks, Mom, LOL. Not just before marriage, but long term. My ex-husband and I had before we were married and felt that hard Christian guilt. We had like rabbits, got pregnant, and married all in 5 months. After I got the ring dropped significantly because he didn't see the value in it. When we did have it, lasted maybe a minute. No cuddling afterwards, and he'd go on his way. He was $20 on the dress away from making me feel like a cheap whore. Not only that, but he was hardly even flirtatious, and the way I could tell he was ever horny was just by him touching me. Other than that, there was nothing. He even told me holding hands was for teenagers. I was so repressed in my own marriage that I thought there was something wrong with me. I began equating with affection because that was the only time he was soft with me. I tried to get him to go to therapy, couples and individual, but he said there was nothing wrong and it'd be a waste. He changed his tune when I told him I was done, but the damage had already been too much. Did his issue stem from the fact that he grew up in an uber religious household, or he grew up in a repressed society? Is he secretly gay or owl? I don't know, I don't care. That's now a mess for someone else to untangle. For myself, I had a lot of hurt and religious indoctrination to sort through. I had left my faith, the main reason we divorced, and began dating a non-religious man. I found out that I didn't care as much about as I did romance. Sure, the in my marriage was atrocious, but there was no romance. No sweet words, no cuddling, no tickling, little forehead kisses. One of my favorite memories between my boyfriend wasn't. It was his sweet, affectionate nature. It was early morning and I was laying on my side. I was woken up to him getting back into bed from getting some water, hip his arms around my waist, and pulled me into him. I just remember being enveloped into his warmth and feeling him kiss my shoulder. We laid there for a while and enjoyed the moment. So yes, I think before marriage is a must if you are not repulsed. I've heard horror stories of marriages being destroyed because it wasn't until after wedlock that they discovered their drives were entirely different. It causes depression. It causes divorce. In some extreme cases, it pushes people to cheat on or abuse their partner. I just don't think it's worth it to wait when it could potentially make or break a relationship. My drive is vastly higher than my wife's. When she isn't available for whatever reason, I do what I need to do. After 15 years married, I finally got the balls to mention offhandedly that I take care of business on my own multiple times a week. And surprisingly, she has since been more involved and willing to participate. End of the day, the relationship is more important than, at least for me. No, unless you're both owl. Yule compatibility is an important part of a relationship, and that's not something you can determine just through conversation. X is probably the least consequential part of marriage. It's everything else that makes a person a good partner that matters. Why do you think you see older couples divorce after being married for decades? It's because once you're like 70, that doesn't matter. And if was the only thing holding it up, then you are just waiting for your spouse to die at that point. Learning to live together as equals before marriage seems like a better test of compatibility. I moved out at 15 and had my own place with my boyfriend at 16. At 18, I got my first mortgage. It's not always easy to live with someone, but after all we've been through as a couple, we are still together. We've been in love for coming up to 29 years. I met him at 14 years old. We didn't have until I was 16, legal age of consent UK. I just knew. When I first saw him, I just knew. He was sent for me. He saved me. He continues to save me every day. God, we've been through hell and back more times than I can remember. We've had to deal with so much hurt. I'm going through one of the darkest and hardest parts of my life right now, and he's still here, with me, saving me every day. Without him, I definitely wouldn't be here. I would have died at 14 years old. I owe my life to him many times over. There are bigger things than, but should be loving. Don't ever be forced into something you're not comfortable with, ever. Growing up very conservatively and deeply Christian unknowingly left me with religious trauma and repressed Yule attraction, never having been allowed to really experience that. Basically, so there was a lot of repeated and painful attempts at with my first long-term partner. My partner was also religiously traumatized, but we were very emotionally connected, so I thought the rest could be worked through. After 5 years of dating and another 6 years of marriage, nothing had changed. But the lack of physical intimacy continued to feel like a hole in our relationship and my own personal fulfillment. Long story short, we ended up divorcing amicably, and each found partners that seemed to fulfill our needs in ways we couldn't with each other. I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't otherwise be married to the man I am with now. But I also wouldn't recommend getting married to anyone without knowing if you are physically compatible or if they are even your type, which is hard to know if you've never allowed yourself to experience Yule attraction. And it's difficult to experience that without living together first. I also wouldn't recommend religious drama. That messed me up. There should be a bunch of stuff people should get figured out about themselves before they decide what commitments to make. What is your love language? How do you show? Accept love. What do you need to feel happy in life? How do you handle stress? What do you avoid because it is risky for you? What is your partner's love language? How do they show? Accept love. What do they want to do with their life? How do they handle stress? What do they try to avoid because it is risky for them? It's cool, but like 3% of total relationship time. Y'all can't really think you spent 20 to 30 of each day out there banging away, 4.58 hours a day, for decades together. I've been with my chick 10 years, and I don't think anyone would seriously believe me if I claimed I've banged her the equivalent of near 3 years straight. Yes, can absolutely be a pivotal part in deciding a relationship. But y'all will be doing so much more than banging over the full time together. For example, I can deal if won't do blow jobs, or even if is the best ever. But if keeps spending our savings on shoes, expensive things while we live in near squalor, even though we agree to save it to move, improve our combined situation. There are problems beyond that I need to address if I want to be in this relationship. I wish I would have waited for my husband I had with a douchebag bodybuilder, and gave him my virginity at 17. He was in his 20s. I was young and naive, and he abused me mentally, emotionally, and physically. I was unknowingly the other woman, and he openly told me that what enticed him was me being a virgin. I was the buckle on his belt. He said he had only been with 5 women, and I was number 6. No, he confessed that he lost count years ago, and that he cheated on his long-term girlfriend with not just me, but 3 other women too. When it all ended, the girlfriend and I dated for some time because I was recently abused and didn't want to be hetero anymore. It didn't work out, but we are great friends to this day and talk almost every day and see each other often. 1 year after all of that ended, I found my husband. It was love at first sight, and we moved along fast. Now, 8 years later, we have a child, a home, dogs, and a stable, beautiful life built on love. My boys are my everything. I have PTSD and anxiety. I have trauma that runs deep because the things I went through with my ex, they are things of literal nightmares. They are too vulgar to share, but with those who are close to me that won't be triggered by it. My husband met what he called a beautiful wreck, a mess that needed love and care. He saw me when I was ready to give up on love, and when I told God if this date doesn't go well, I'm to be a spinster. And he healed my heart and tended to my wounds. He has always known how to calm me down and help me find my center when something freaks me out and I have a meltdown, etc. I haven't had one for 3 years. Oh yeah, I wish to God I would have waited just 1 more year and gave my V-card to the love of my life. The man who deserved me and loves me wholly, flaws and all. If I could take it back, I would in a heartbeat. I just wanted to address the Yule compatibility thing I've seen in the comments so many times. When I was younger, I'd probably make this argument as well. But as I've gotten older and have loved several different women, Yule compatibility doesn't exist in a way that you might think. Sure, it exists for a one-night stand. It can be great or terrible. It is so different when you love someone. It's far more emotional than just physical fun. With someone you love will always be better than a one-night stand, even if the other person isn't great at. There are some benefits on waiting with. The most obvious ones are limiting the risk of unwanted pregnancy and STDs. Beyond that, Yule active people tend to have a hormonal response that makes them fonder of their partner. If good happens too early in a relationship, this hormonal response can mask red flags that otherwise would have been noticed. There are also benefits of not waiting with. Clearly, feels good, and humans are often happier if they get to enjoy a Yule relationship. Also, it is good to know what Yule kinks, etc. one leans to before committing to a lifelong exclusive partner. Personally, I feel it is important to spend some time getting to know each other Before adding to a relationship, I also feel it is very helpful to figure out if one is Yuli compatible before tying the knot. I think people should be more calculated about who they have with. I think should be a more normalized relationship. Having with multiple random people is just so risky. Saving to marriage is also an extreme for me. Is an insanely important part of a connection between two people who mate for life. You have no clue until it's too late to know if your libidos match, if they're into what you're into. Or maybe you have discovered that this partner's style of intimacy doesn't mesh well with yours. That will be the source of a lot of awkwardness, resentment, and conflict no matter how strong a bond is. I have a buddy who waited. Come to find out they are not Yuli compatible. They love each other, but he's really miserable about their life for lack of one, and she won't do anything about it or let him do anything about it. I think if you want to make the gamble of waiting, you and your partner should have a conversation about what happens if you end up rolling snake eyes. 'Cause it's not fair for someone like my buddy to never get laid just 'cause his wife doesn't want to and didn't know it before they got married. Imagine waiting until you're married with somebody to discover that they're actually Yuli incompatible with you and is unwilling to satisfy your Yule needs because it does not align with theirs. Now you're in a marriage where you will forever be Yuli frustrated because you thought it was a good idea to wait that long. And instead of the simple process of splitting up that a boyfriend and girlfriend could do, you now have a bunch of paperwork to get done and a divorce process. Sounds horrible. On one hand, I sorta get the whole religious thing blah blah before marriage is bad, sure, but keep in mind divorce is also against the Bible. Now ignoring that, I would never wait until marriage, as I want to know that I am compatible with someone both physically and emotionally. You could get together very well, but then just not click at all Yuli. And if in most scenarios that is the last person who have with for your life outside of cheating, poly etc., then I want to be damn sure we are good together. Now, as a solid middle ground, I'm not saying you should have on the first date or even the first month. Figure a thing out that makes sense for you as a couple. But I also think you should live together before marriage too. I've known plenty of people who waited till they got married. Small Midwest town. How they are divorced and have 2 kids together since they waited till marriage. They ate like rabbits. More power to them. But even then stuff wasn't great clearly. You want to be sure that you live together before marriage to make sure you can stand and enjoy the little things that your partner does daily. Their habits, how they don't make the bed, how they like food, etc. If you find out you just cannot stand something they do but you didn't find that out till you were married, well, you can get a divorce or try and work through it. But back to my first point. My mom, who is a rather Christian woman but is progressive, has also said you should live with someone before marriage for same reasons above too. TLDR. You never truly know someone till you live together and sleep together both and not. Don't be fully committed for life until you know them that way.